Well, we now have to consider, I think, what happens with capital movements. And we'll assume for simplicity that capital movements internationally are free. In other words, if an investor sees an opportunity in your country giving a high rate of return than he can earn elsewhere, he presents his capital to your exchange rate and buys your currency to invest in the particular project in your country that he wants. This increases, of course, your exchange rate. It appreciates. Has the effect of your currency being worth more. You increase imports, the effect of which starts to counteract to some extent the rise in the exchange rate. Your currency that he has bought increases investment in that industry. Now there's an ambiguity here. The foreign investor may be literally lending money to your firms, and they use the money to divert resources into production, which tends to divert resources away from other industries in your country, assuming you've got full employment already. Let's assume that wages are as flexible as prices for the time being. Resources shift out of the other industries into the export industry. We'll suppose that, this industry is doing well because it's exporting. And as it starts to increase the exports, the home exchange rate strengthens further. So we've got these forces going on. Resources are shifting from some of the home industries to an industry that's probably exporting. If wages are inflexible downwards, then of course labour's, if you like, being made unemployed in the what we'll call declining industries at home, the home industries. Wages are too high to clear actual supply to that industry, so they lay the labour off. It's unemployed. Now, you might think, oh well, that's all right, that labour will be employed elsewhere in the expanding export industry, but not necessarily, of course, not in the short run. In the short run, it's not appropriate, it's not skilled in the right way. Wages continue to rise in the export industry, but labour doesn't transfer across because it's not of the right sort, say. It takes time to retrain, or they just won't retrain, or, Does that mean we want to shift the labour faster? Well, in a sense, yes. But we might not be willing to take the social cost of temporary unemployment whilst, the wages fall and the workers in that industry getting very upset because, home industry is because their standard of living is going down, not up. Although, of course, the capital flow coming in, strengthening the exchange rate overall, has meant that foreign goods are cheaper. That's no good if you're unemployed. You've got no money at all to spend. So, of course, the state may provide unemployment pay, which makes people less inclined to desperately switch across, of course, because they've got some income. It offsets the the incentive, but on the other hand, does relieve hardship. And of course, helps to keep up a level of spending at home. Now, you're going to get inflation. Unless covered by taxes, the unemployment pay has increased the money supply, but still shifted labour to some extent into the new industry. That's earning high wages. They're able to buy goods that they want, including foreign goods, of course, which is pushing the exchange rate downwards in the other direction. So different forces here. But you do have unemployment in as far as it's not shifting across fast enough to the expanding export industry. In other words, those in that expanding industry, their wages are rising, reflecting a shortage of their skills. They're quite happy. The others that are becoming unemployed are less happy. If you like, just getting by on state benefit, unemployment pay. You see what we're saying here, that if wages are inflexible downwards, we do need socially unemployment pay, or you're going to have some combination of people starving and rioting, unless you can suppress it in some other probably unacceptable way. Is the export industry a benefit then to your society? It's mixed, isn't it? And in particular, of course, it's less of a benefit if the export industry itself is very volatile. You know, capital flows into it 1 minute and then, you know, a few months later it's flowing out and everything's all changed again. And to the extent that wages are inflexible downwards in any contracting industry, costs are the higher in the export industry, which may greatly hamper the flow of resources into that industry. It becomes less attractive to the foreigner. Capital flows may start to be choked off. In some sense, you're missing out on an opportunity, aren't you? Your country. The expanding industry is being choked. Costs, if anything, are rising in the home industries. The export industry isn't rising as much as it could, and you have unemployment. And this might be quite persistent. Well, we haven't got all the complications of the modern economy in here by any means, but in a simplistic way, what's the solution? Your problem seems to be that inflexibility of wages downwards. Right, make it flexible, but you don't want a revolution on your hands. So everybody is to receive from the state a certain income, come what may, whether you're employed or not. So you get this national wage, as I'll call it here. There are better names for it, but we'll stick with that for the time being. Simple. You get the government wage. Yeah, we'll call it a government wage, shall we? Which is some sort of, I don't know, what's settled as reasonable income to live on if you've nothing else. We'll say, for argument's sake, it covers the necessities of life in your society, whatever that's deemed to be. And you get that come what may. But you can't have a wage contract that keeps your wage fixed into an unknown future. Okay? So if you want to work cutting hedges for the lady next door for $5 an hour, you do it. And if you want to and can get employment in, the growth export industry, because you've requalified or you've been willing to shift location across the country, then you receive the high wage, relatively speaking, of employment there. And you still don't lose. It's not that it's offset against and discouraged by the fact that you lose your government wage. You still get that. Everyone gets that, come what may. This has the advantage in, should something happen world depression-wise, the expenditure in your economy stays up and demands goods and services, necessities, compared to countries where they're starving on the streets and they're relying on soup kitchens and so forth. Arguably has been the reason in the past why Europe managed to get out of the Depression to some extent, didn't have such trouble in the Depression as the United States did, because Europe was more socialist and more willing to, provide unemployment benefits of some sort or another, which kept demand up in the economy to some sort of minimum level that was rather better than collapse in the US in the 30s. There's some advantage in looking at history, isn't there? And that can one learn lessons from it? Of course, we could be wrong. That's not the lesson, but it looks as though that's the case. So now wages are flexible. And of course, from, if you like, right-wing politics point of view, free market people, well, they're pro this in a sense, in that wages can flex around accordingly. They're against it from the point of view of who's going to pay the money. Is it going to be inflationary, paying all this government wage out? Well, will be a cost in some sense, of course. There are people that would be quite happy to just live on, well, I won't say too happy, but to live on just the necessities of life. They adjust down and they stay down. Some people do. I mean, they'll be on their device all day and living on basic foods. Whether they can afford McDonald's or not, well, that depends on whether you think that's a necessity. I mean, what they're buying are what they see as necessities, I guess. Or in a sense, what society sees as their necessities in the culture they're in. And I'm sure that will be some sort of contentious issue to some extent. But I mean, there aren't going to be perfect answers in this world, but we can, tweak things so that they are more stable politically and kinder, quite honestly. So in some ways we might call this a socialist situation, but it's free market situation too, in the sense that it's wanting to free up wage adjustments in the way that price adjustments are pretty free in the society as well. In review then, it's worth pointing out that what we've said here is we have got capital flows in the system, and it's foreign investment at that. And it does affect the exchange rate. So we're now not just saying I'm seeking a balance of trade overall, but I'm seeking a balance of payments that include capital flows overall. I'm letting the exchange rate adjust not just for the trade balance or imbalance, but for the net of trade and capital flow. Well, that's a model then, isn't it, that's nearer, shall we say, in some simplistic sense, what the real world is like. And there's other complications, of course, we're going to want to look at. But 15 minutes concentration is enough for most people. So I'm going to stop here for a minute. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.